Hey scholars, today we're going to be talking about Kate Chopin's The Story of an Hour. Notice in the beginning of the story, she writes, knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with heart trouble. Okay, we have a character who was already in trouble, right? She has heart trouble. The author would not point this out in the very beginning of the story if it wasn't crucial. So this is the first hint of foreshadowing. Great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. So already in the intro, we have conflict. Her husband's dead. They didn't want to tell her because she has heart trouble. Very significant. Okay, notice the second paragraph. The sister Josephine has to be the one that tells her. But just like her heart, just like the death, she's saying it in broken sentences. But she has to veil these hints that revealed and half concealing. That's a beautiful line. Look at that. Veiled hints. All right, like someone who has died has a veil in front of them. But it's also the consonants, right? The veiled, revealed, and it's like half concealing, half revealing. Her husband's friend Richard was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office with the intelligence that he had killed, that has been killed. All right. Think about also why would Kate Chopin call this woman Mrs. Mallard? A mallard is a type of duck. These types of ducks kind of are together forever. And so here we have maybe a bit of irony that these two ducks, Mr. and Mr. Mallard, are no longer together. Of course, in the third paragraph, of course she does what any typical wife would do hearing about her husband dying. She wept at once with a sudden wild abandonment in her sister's arms. Then there's this storm of grief that spent itself, and then she has to go to her room alone, and she would not have anyone follow her, which, again, makes perfect sense. We have to realize, though, this woman has heart trouble. Then in the fourth paragraph, all right, there stood facing an open window. Okay, open windows are very significant. This is a very important symbol. Think about what it might mean. She's in a room, there's a window. Maybe she wants to go through the window. Maybe she wants to escape this room. We just know there's an open window. And there's a comfy chair. She sinks into this chair, and then she's physically exhausted. Then it haunts her body and seems to reach into her soul. Again, we have to remember that this woman is not physically okay. In the next paragraph, we have nature springing to life. All right, we have the delicious breath of rain. We have new spring life. We have the peddler crying his wares. There's a distant song through this open window. If this window wasn't open, she wouldn't have any smell. There wouldn't be anything like this. It would just be shut. But it's open, so she's getting the world. And perhaps new life, because here we see patches of blue sky showing. The storm is abated. The rain has gone, right? Because there had been rain, but now there's that smell of rain in the air, and it's gone. And now perhaps, there might be some hope here. And here later, in the next couple paragraphs, Kate Chopin characterizes her, how she's young. She has a calm face. She has lines that bespoke repression and even a certain strength. All right, so think about that. There's that repression that she's been repressed, this woman. She's young, she has a calm face, but she has the strength. But now there is a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed off yonder through these patches of blue sky. So we're getting to know her a little bit better. Even in this very, very short story, we have a picture of a woman who's been repressed, but strong, and now has to try to deal with life without her perhaps domineering husband. And then there was something coming to her, waiting for it, fearfully. What was it? Nice rhetorical question. What is this thing that she's been thinking about as she's sitting in this armchair looking through the open window, where she sees life happening? Of course, life is not happening in her room. It's all happening outside her room, where perhaps she wants to be. It was too subtle and elusive to name, but she felt it creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the sky. Notice this is a beautiful parallel structure. When you use an article the sounds, you also have to have the sense, the color. It has to be that way for the parallel structure. And notice the story starts changing a little bit. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, like this monster coming from the sky. And she was striving to beat it back, this violence, but it was impossible to beat it back. What is this thing? The thing is she's free, free, free. In rhetoric, we call that epesius, where it's the Trinity. It's the naming of three things in a row. Very, very effective. Free, free, free. She suddenly feels free of this husband, and she has her own life to live now. Right? The vacant stare and look of terror that followed it went from her eyes. She can't believe that she can finally live her own life rather than living under the thumb of her husband, Mr. Mallard. And why does she use the oxymoronic monstrous joy? I mean, a joy is never really used as monstrous, right? That's bad. Joy's good. But this joy did seem like a monster to her because it's terror. Like, how I'm a bad woman if I'm actually happy that my husband's dead. But there it is. And it holds her. She's so happy. She knew she would weep again and she would be sad, but I don't have to live for anybody else. It's just me, right? And this line's great. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. And then she says, before that line, there'd be no powerful will, like her husband, bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. Notice she doesn't say a fellow human being, a creature. She feels like a creature, not really human, because a human would not live under the thumb of another human being. But we all believe we have the right to impose our will on another person. And this is the problem with marriage in the United States in the time Kate Chopin was writing this. And then she says, yeah, I loved him sometimes. Often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery? Now that's called an appositive. When you rename a noun like love and call it the unsolved mystery, that's called an appositive. It's like Walter Bowne, my English teacher. The English teacher is the appositive. It renames the noun by adding more information to it. And of course, she's using the exclamation points, right? The strongest impulse of her being, free, body and soul free. That's called amplification in rhetoric. When you mention something once, like ice cream, and then you add other things to the ice cream, like ice cream, huge mountains of ice cream. Here she uses that amplification, free, body and soul free, she kept whispering. And of course, if you introduce another character, this Josephine, once, she has to come back. She comes back, she's knocking on the door, open the door, you'll make yourself ill. The sister, of course, thinks she's so upset about losing her husband, she doesn't know it's the exact opposite, right? Go away, I'm not making myself ill. She doesn't want to be bothered by anybody. She's finally free. She can live her own life, right? And then she's thinking of all these great days that are ahead of her, spring days and summer days and all sorts of days. That type of rhetorical device is called an epistrophe. Epistrophe is when you use the same word at the end of a sentence or successive clauses. So here she's using days, summer days, and all sorts of days. Notice how beautiful that is. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. Oh, that might be irony, right? She breathed a quick prayer. How can you breathe? That's kind of a very interesting way of saying it, that her life might be long. It only seemed yesterday that she thought with a shudder that life might be long. Just yesterday, she worried about having a long life with this awful husband, right? Well, I don't know if he's awful, but someone she didn't really want to be with. Now, one day later, she wants a long life for her to live her own life. But we know this isn't going to end well, right? It's a story of an hour. It's not the story of a life. And she's going to be dead by the end of this story because someone comes knocking. There's someone that comes back, Brentley Mallard. He enters, and he's not dead. And rumor that he was dead, or the news that he was dead, was wrong, and she realizes it, and she dies because of the heart trouble. Everyone thinks she died because she was just so happy to see her husband, and it was a love that kills. We know she died and had the heart trouble because she was so upset that her husband's back. So the irony is the reader knows the truth. Everybody else in the story thinks she was just a really, really good wife who loved her husband and was shocked that he was back, that he was alive, but it's the exact opposite. And it's the irony that a joy that kills. It is just amazing. That makes this story amazing. Thank you for listening.